Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking.
This is Initiated Survivor, where we share survivors' voices and our stories of recovery and reclaiming our power. I'm Kelsey Harper. I'm a clinical psychologist and a survivor, and I like to share helpful tips and skills about recovery from trauma. As a community of survivors, we have tremendous power to change the world, so thank you so much for being here. Here we discuss stories and information that is relevant to survivors of gender-based violence and sexual violence. These topics may be triggering and are for adult ears only, so please be mindful of your needs throughout. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Initiated Survivor. This episode is a bittersweet one, or maybe complexly sweet one. This is going to be my last episode of Initiated Survivor for the foreseeable future. I'm closing things up with my podcast with so much celebration and gratitude for the journey this project has been and all the wonderful people in my life. I continue to work directly with survivors in offering therapy and workshops and professional trainings, as well as many other things that may develop. I can and will still be reachable through my website at drkelseyharper.com. I'm only closing the podcast part of my work. I feel I've reached a place where this podcast has worked the magic it was intended to. And it's time for me to set off in new ways of connecting with this powerful community. When I started off this journey, this podcast was really just an idea. And it wasn't even an idea for a podcast. It was an idea for how do I deal with what is coming up in me. You know, I was up to my neck in my own trauma recovery and feeling very frustrated and alone. And it seemed like the world wasn't listening or hearing survivors. And I had so much anger and sadness to express and so much grief and compassion, but also a lot of drive and determination. And I really wanted to declare that we are worth prioritizing. And really, I set out for a couple years trying to find a way to this path of being able to make this declaration, and ultimately came to this podcast, Initiated Survivor. Through this podcast, I learned and I grew a whole lot. And at first, I was really self-conscious about exposing my learning curve in this way. I was afraid of people hearing and seeing me make mistakes or say something ignorant, and that I wouldn't be my full, complete, masterful self on this podcast for all the world to hear. And it was actually Sam Valentine, my producer, editor, and all around podcast witch, who reminded me that actually noticing that I would say things differently in the future is a good thing because it means that I'm growing. And I really held on to that. It felt like it made my podcast actually much more real and authentic, and what I was sharing with people much more real and authentic. And I really love how this podcast connected me to different people and communities and helped me dive deeper into these really uncomfortable places in myself. And that there's a record of my exploration of this and of me being really, truly human, because that's the truth, isn't it? That we never really complete growing, learning, developing, shaping, evolving. At least if we try, we never will. And I hope I don't. Through exposing my own recovery journey, including all the things to learn and unlearn and dismantle and restructure in me, I found a way to truly be with myself more authentically as a survivor, as a person in our culture and community, and how to really mobilize truly in the way that I wanted to. I am so grateful for all the people who helped make this podcast possible and help make it happen, including Sam Valentine and her team at Fast Forward Productions, The Women Are Speaking, who encouraged me and equipped me with everything I need to make my voice heard. And I'm so grateful for all the survivors who joined me on this podcast and bravely shared their stories and reached out and offered connection and wisdom to me and to all of us out here, and to all of the community of folks who work and support survivors that also shared their unique offerings to help us heal and reclaim ourselves. The most important thing that came from this for me was building community. I've connected with so many amazing people and with so many awesome spaces that I now feel so much more woven into our fabric of life than I ever have before. And this podcast offered me a training ground to really shape and practice those skills on how to be vulnerable and sit with others' vulnerability as they also witness mine, and get out there even when I'm hurting and scared, letting go of needing to be a perfect self and allowing relationships to not just be there with me, but actually to be healing and themselves an agent of change in my life. I have much more grounded faith in our world because I know so many of the people determined to help us change it. And it was through this podcast that really enabled me to reach out and meet a bunch of people and put myself out there and connect with folks that has helped me be able to see that and witness that. One of the weirdest things, one of my closest friends, anytime that I'm feeling small and inconsequential, will remind me that through this podcast, even misogynistic men's rights activists have concluded that I'm a credible and knowledgeable resource about gender-based violence. It is very weird and hilarious. It was following the letter in support of Amber Heard that I signed along with hundreds of other experts in the field and women's organizations. After that, a collection of men's rights activists tried to discredit the letter by determining who the signatories were actual experts and who wasn't. They determined that I was an actual expert. So not being dismissible by misogynists is a cool title to carry, and I highly recommend becoming undismissible. I'm forever grateful for the ways this podcast helped me with my own recovery. There was nothing more powerful than getting to fully own and declare who I am and what I went through. That helped me with returning back into myself completely and to be ready to continue living and really participate in living. I'm not really entirely sure what's going to come next. I continue to connect with communities of survivors and learn more and riot and revolt, even more so now. And I know I will continue creating resources for survivors and offer those to you all as well. I will always be here for any and all survivors in need or want of connection and support. My podcast will remain available to help anyone feeling invisible or feeling burdened by their trauma to feel more seen and more hopeful. We can and do recover, and we can and will make a better world. I am determined in this. If you would like to continue hearing from me, sign up for my newsletter at my website at drkelseyharper.com/contact. I regularly write and release blog posts, workshops, and speaking events that you can attend, as well as kind words for survivors and anyone who is grappling with trauma recovery. On my website, you can also learn more about those offerings and also about the therapy that I offer. And if you want to, you can also book an appointment right there to start trauma therapy with me right now. Again, thank you so much for being here with me over and across this journey, as I firmly believe that with each survivor's healing, we are all more liberated. Thank you. Merry meet again. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Sam Valentine and her team at Fast Forward Productions for editing, producing, publishing, and all-around podcast magic that makes this podcast possible. If you found something that resonated with you, please rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. This simple but meaningful action really helps increase the visibility and accessibility of this podcast to survivors and allies that may be looking for some support and connection. I love connecting with listeners and allies, so please feel free to share this episode on your socials and go ahead and tag me in it at Initiated Survivor or at Kelsey J. Harper. A final but very important note: while I am a clinical psychologist, this episode and this podcast does not constitute professional mental health care or therapy, nor is it a replacement for professional therapy. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The podcast host and the guests are not rendering professional advice and should not be considered to have developed a professional relationship. If you are looking for mental health care or professional help, please seek it out. We have some links in the show notes that may help you with that, or you can contact your insurance carrier directly for referrals.